You can start.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. Hello and welcome. My name is Mary Lou Rabulis, Client Relations at CIM. On behalf of the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, we thank you for attending today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. And most of us attending today are also on traditional unceded territory. Today, we're honoring Black History Month, Leaders in Mining. I'm pleased to introduce Teresa Nayabis, Chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of CIM. Annie Lawrenson, Director, Governance and Corporate Secretary at Lundin Mining. Jacqueline Allison, Chair of the Board of Canstar Resources, and Keith Spence, CEO and partner of Global Mining Capital. And now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Teresa, who will be the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Lou, and good afternoon to everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're in the world, and good morning if you're somewhere else in the world. But we're so pleased to have you here, everybody. It's going to be a great conversation, and it is cause for celebration as we wrap up Black History Month in Canada. I have been absolutely overwhelmed and impressed by the sheer amount of recognition that the mining industry has demonstrated for this topic. And so today, so welcome, Jackie, Keith, and Annie. Nice to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Wow. Amazing. So, without further ado, I would want to dive into the conversation. I've been dying to kind of get into it. So, Jackie, you're somebody that I've really watched and admired from afar for many, many years. And I've always been really curious about your background, kind of where your country of origin was and how your identity and experiences have been shaping your journey in the mining industry.
Yeah, well, happy to jump into that. Thanks for having me here. So I come from a small island. I'm from Jamaica. I was born to parents who were not Jamaican, but came from the Caribbean area as well. So my mother was Black, partly Indian from Barbados. My father was a Chinese man from Guyana. And so they'd met in Jamaica and we were born there. So I grew up in a country that was, I'd say, vast amounts of the population was Black, and I identified as Black in anything I filled out while I was there, even though I was half Chinese. And when I came to Canada, I had to think about that a little bit more. But, largely with my roots, I still identify as Black, sometimes mixed, sometimes Caribbean, depending on what's on the form. There's so many choices these days. But it was a very diverse country. In fact, our motto is out of many, one people. And that's because we have this melting pot of Blacks and Indians and Syrians and Chinese, people who had come either through the slave trade or indentured labor or were the colonists in the first place, or others who came to do business. Very mixed group. And so, we grew up understanding diversity, taking it for granted. And I wouldn't say there was equality completely, because it was a country that had all these different races, different economic segments, and it had its own layering system as well. So that's not unique to the first world. It happens in many places. And sometimes we don't actually appreciate some of the advantages we have until we leave a place. So in Jamaica, I probably had advantages because I was lighter skinned. Which I didn't really think about. And coming to Canada, it was an adjustment. I was pretty confident in who I was, but certainly it's a new culture, it's a new climate, everything. There were lots of things. You didn't have your support system around you. So there are adjustments for anybody who has to make that transition. But I would say I had a good grounding. And I can think of a friend who at school was lighter skinned as well, but had Black in her. Her hair was curly, it wasn't straight. And when she came to Canada, she emigrated during high school. I remember her saying that, she went from being just a person in the class, one of the lighter skin, it was mixed, as we mentioned. And in Canada, she was the Black kid in the class. So that was certainly an adjustment for her. And now she said she understood how it felt to be that person. And I think she had to, really dig inside and remember who she was and where she was coming from, and be comfortable with that. So, many countries are welcoming. Canada was. There were so many opportunities. There are reasons people move around. I came for graduate studies, and I was the only female in my class. There were 3 Blacks out of 6 in my group, so I was in good company. but for others, that's not necessarily the case. So that's a bit about my background. I came up through geology, so my background's technical. I did layer on some of the, I'd say, economics and finance, because I thought it was really important to understand the business that I was going to be part of. So what are the technicals, but also how does that fit into the bigger picture, and how are decisions made? And to do that, I had to understand how the business is run and what are the drivers. So I made sure to add that layer on, which for me was great. It opened other doors as well. And so part of it was, how do I understand what I'm doing now, but where might this take me?
Right. So, it's interesting as you talk about the transition of, coming from an island, coming to Canada, and really having to revisit kind of your ethnicity and how it would kind of, fit into the context of Canada, and the colorism, right? Discovering that maybe there was a bit of an advantage back home compared to here. And I think it's a good thing for people on the call to just reflect on to what extent colorism is still a thing, even in our Canadian context, and how it can be a detriment to people. So it makes me think about just self-leadership and really believing in yourself and pursuing excellence, which is what you've really done, Jackie. And it makes me think of you, Keith. You've done so much for the mining industry. I remember finding out that you were one of the pioneers of Simval, which is just amazing. So you're definitely a rock star in mining terms. And I think of your leadership, and I think, like, what are some of those leadership qualities that you feel are essential for driving change and fostering inclusivity in the mining sector? And please do tell us more about any initiatives that you've spearheaded and led in our industry.
Yeah, I think you touch on the keyword initiative, and I would suggest for any Black person who want to move up professionally, or even within their immediate circle, taking the initiative whenever the opportunity arises. If you have the opportunity, take it. And that has been my motto for most of my life. Anytime I see something needs to be done, I don't wait for somebody to tell me to do it. I try to get it done. The example you talked about, the Canadian mining valuation standards, Simval, is a perfect example. After Bre-X, the mining industry was in a state of shock. I'm not sure how many of you know about it, but it was a Canadian company in Indonesia that had a market cap of about 70 billion at its peak. And they were not 70 billion, I think it was allegedly 70 million ounces of gold. But the market cap was somewhere in the range of 7 billion. And it blew up because it was a fake. It was a fake, and a lot of people lost money, including me. I was at the Bank of Montreal at that time. And I thought, we should do something about this. And a lot of people in the industry was talking about doing something. And around that time, a committee was established to look into what we should do to put our industry in good stead. And some of the ideas that people suggested at that time are now standards that we take for granted. Standards like disclosure standards, which is 43101, resource reserve standards, classifications, which we all know, inferred, measured, etc. Exploration standards, like standards, for example, nobody used to split the core, and just simple things like that, quality control, etc. And I took on because my first degree, I'm a geologist, geophysicist, and then I have an MBA and I've been an investment banker. So I took on one of the areas that needed both the technical and the financial skills. And I thought, we should really get something going with respect to valuation standards, because that was one of the actually, if you look at BRIEX, one of the main causes was the valuation issue also. So I went out, I thought, if I'm going to start something to set up standards, I need some credible people. And I went out, I got Bill Roscoe, who has been my co-chair from the start until now, and a lot of other senior people in the mining space who were well respected, brought them in, gave them the mandate, went to CIM, got CIM to approve what we wanted to do, and we established Simval.
And
Simval
you know,
now, I just want
and
to say
Keith, yeah,
one
sorry, go
point.
ahead.
Yeah, Simval is now world recognized. It's the #1 valuation standard in the world. It's required by the TSX. It's required by regulatory bodies all over the world.
Beautiful. And, it really speaks to, you believing some self-belief there, right? And then also finding people who are willing to collaborate with you and also leading together and fostering that teamwork in the industry.
Yes, yes. And it was important also to be credible, seen as credible, that people, when I went to them and I said, this is what I want to do, people like Bill Roscoe and a lot of other names that I could mention who came on to the committee, thought, well, Keith, if you want to do this, I'm with you. And I would say at that time, when we were doing Simval and starting these valuation standards, it took a lot of time. And I had friends saying, oh, why are you wasting your time on this thing that nobody's going to give you any pay for it? And it turned out to be one of my prime achievements.
And how diverse was it? I mean, just thinking back to the Black History Month and your representation.
Well, yes, in that committee, I was, of course, the only Black person. There were no other. And at CIM at that time, there was, I think I was the only Black person or person, minority person at CIM. And at that time, I was in CIM Council. So, so as I think back, I was a rarity. And I think
you may be the first. We don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, maybe the first.
We might have a trailblazer on the call.
I'm almost sure I was the first. Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, so it's what I love is that we can look at history. It's interesting living in 2025, right? Because it's like you're still seeing first, and the first are still around, and it's remarkable. And it makes me think of you, Annie. You're somebody that I know has done remarkable work in the mining industry. Just in your role as in governance, you're making so many strides in that arena. And of course, we all know that there are going to be amazing opportunities, but there's some challenges that do happen. And I'm really curious from the context of yourself being a Black leader in the mining industry, what are some challenges and obstacles you've overcome? Oh, is she muted? Yes, it has to happen once during it.
Yes, it does have to happen once, and it has to be me. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for that, Teresa. And just to add on to what Keith is saying there, and you talk about challenges, that being the only has been sort of a big part of my sort of career coming up. I've always found myself sometimes to be the only in the room, but I think one of the most significant challenges, has been navigating a space where representation is limited, being one of the few Black, I don't like to call myself a leader, but, maybe more of an advocate, a mentor in the industry, meant facing stereotypes and biases, both overt and sometimes subtle. And I can tell you that for the most part, it's very subtle, but it's there. You kind of walk away thinking, did I, and you start to think about it. Additionally, I think the lack of mentorship from people who understood sort of my unique experience made the journey more challenging, if anything. However, these obstacles also motivated me to be a role model and advocate for more inclusive workspaces and to speak up for what I believe in. I think one of the biggest things that I had to do, and maybe this is segueing into our next question, is, finding my voice. you know, and I always tell this to people, it's like, you have to find your voice in order to challenge these sort of the obstacles that you're facing. Because if you have no voice, then you're not going to get anywhere. So that's a big thing for me.
Yeah, and you know, I love what you're saying about, I think you're acknowledging that, yes, we want people to find their voices, but at the same time, I think we're acknowledging that it does require mentorship and
Yeah.
being in community with others to really have the courage to kind of, you know, maybe through representation, seeing role models and allies, of course. I mean, I know there's quite a few people on the call that I know I would not hesitate to pick. I would be very, I would not hesitate to pick up the phone for coaching and mentoring. But it does really beg
I think we're losing Teresa there, but you know, I'll continue on and just talk about, you know,
just to connect with you. You know, what does this raise for you when we talk about challenges and overcoming barriers in our industry?
okay, I lost you there for a second, but I think you're asking me how did I overcome these challenges? You know, I overcame these challenges by building a strong support network. Number one, both from within and outside the industry. Mentorship, even from those outside of mining, provided, you know, sort of invaluable guidance and perspective. I also prioritize continuous learning and resilience, focusing on excellence in my work to dismantle, you know, preconceived notions. One of the things, and I'm originally from Zimbabwe, so one of the things I did when I first came to Canada, and I would, you know, go into rooms and I'd speak to people. I'm looking for jobs, you know, going to interviews, and half the time people were not even listening to what I was saying because they were just trying to figure out my accent and where I was from. So I took elocution lessons to get rid of that accent, which I deeply regret now. It does come out once in a while when I have a couple of drinks, but you know, I did that just to sort of move ahead, right? But again, that's one of those things where you're trying to overcome a challenge by trying to fit in. But you know, I think now going backwards, would I have done that? Probably not. But you know, at the time, it's what I thought was right for me. So I did that. But my advice to those is, you know, to everyone is to remain authentic, find allies who understand your vision, and never shy away from advocating for yourself and others, and build your brand. I think that's how you, in my view, that's how you really overcome those challenges. Put yourself out there, network, talk to people. And again, I'm going to reiterate this a lot, is find your voice, because your voice is powerful and it's strong and it's meaningful, and it will open those doors for you.
Thank you, Annie. And Jackie, just to
Yeah.
to layer on to what Annie is saying, what are your experiences with challenges and overcoming them in our industry?
Mhm. Yeah, so some of the similar experiences, I think Annie was talking about the subtle stuff, which is a little harder to even identify sometimes, much less deal with. And it's those microaggressions that, you know, they're real, they build up, and cumulatively they can have a big impact. And I know my kids have faced that. They talk about it much more than I have even. So I've learned from them, you know, what's it like for them to be, you know, the black kid in their class in a largely white neighborhood, what happens to them on the playground. It, you know, and it happens from childhood, and you can only imagine that continues on through adulthood because it's just built into some people, and they may not even realize they're doing it. Some of it could be deliberate, others it just is, you know, they take it, they just don't, maybe aren't fully conscious of what they're doing. So there's a lot of education that has to go into that, and it does start with awareness, but it does weigh on people who have to face it, who are at the other end of that. And so, you know, you could say, look around us and say, no, you know, it's a friendly environment, but you do have to pay attention to some of the detail to understand what environment you're really in. So that's real. For me, it was sometimes, again, am I being heard? Do I have something to say? What are my views? How strongly do I feel about them? How do I feel about myself? So you don't want to get lost in this. So it really is about knowing who you are, where you come from, what you bring, and how that fits into, you know, the group that you're dealing with. Very often we're part of a team, or, you know, we may not be the leader, we may be the leader. We, you know, coming up, we're just usually one of a few that are reporting to somebody, and we always have to understand the dynamics. So try and be very sensitive to not just what someone's qualifications are, but how they behave. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How does that relate to me? How can I fill a need? And do I have the skills to fill that need? And that sometimes guides you as to what you need to do, whether it's go back and do a bit of training, maybe it's professional development. There's lots of things that are available. But for me, I was always very careful about making sure that if I wanted a job, no one would have an excuse to say no based on education. So I did go all the way through school. I wasn't like driven to do a PhD, but I ended up doing it knowing that it might help ultimately. One less thing to say, you don't have now. Truth be told, you didn't really need a PhD for what I ended up doing, but it came in front of me and I took it and did it. And in some ways it was good because I certainly learned a lot in the process. And it wasn't just technical, it was mineral economics. So I was able to start learning again about the business, finance, accounting, economics. And that was my introduction to it. And I loved it. So I kind of, you find your way. You don't necessarily see everything as a clear path before you get to it. But for me, that's one of the reasons I continued along that path, because once I understood what it was about, and I certainly thought this is great. And to be honest, in high school, we thought about the kids who were doing some of these business courses, and we kind of looked down on it because we just didn't know what it was. Like, why would somebody go and do accounting when they could do
Right.
math or science or something else? So
And now we as adults, we know that money runs the whole world.
it does, but having the technical background is also good, right? Because you understand what's going on at different levels, and you can bring that skill. So Keith spoke to the specialty, being a technical person, the geologist who could bring that knowledge, but also layering on the business sides and understanding that. So there are times when being the specialist helps, and there are times when having a broader background is really an advantage. So you might want to think about, what your background is, and again, how does it fit into the needs that you see around you?
Yeah, and all of you are very credentialed human beings. I think if anything, people are getting out of this is, hey, time to go back to school because you're very much equipped. It's interesting. We're talking to somebody about the challenges that people who are perceived as being over credentialed can have, because what happens is sometimes people have a hard time getting those entry level roles, and they go back to school, they get the PhDs, and they just can't get a foot in the door. But to your point around mentorship and really expanding one's network can be very, and into what Keith said about volunteering can be a way to overcome some of those barriers. And it makes me think about future and emerging leaders. Annie, what would you say? What steps can the mining industry take to nurture and support the next generation, of Black leaders? I mean, frankly, the mining industry is suffering from people wanting to even join us. But I do think of those people that the Black people, being Black History Month, I wonder about their experience in trying to actually get into leadership in our industry.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, for me, I think the industry must sort of invest in mentorship programs that connect young Black professionals with, experienced leaders who can provide guidance and support. Additionally, creating sponsorship opportunities that actively advocate for high potential Black talent in leadership discussions is crucial. Educational partnerships with schools, I think that's key. And universities can also help build that pipeline of diverse talent interested in the mining sector. At Lundin Mining, we have what's called our Diversity, Inclusion, Anti-Racism and Discrimination Committee, and we partnered with an organization, a few years ago called. They're out of Toronto, and we sort of put on a mining 101 for kids aged from grades 8 to 12, and it was interesting to see how it was a community of kids from the Jane and Finch area, and they had no idea that, in mining, there was other career paths that you could take. It wasn't all about going underground. And, so we talked about, you could be an accountant, you could be, in HR, you could be in legal. So it opened up an avenue for those kids at that time that they also didn't realize that they could do this. I think the first question we had asked was, when you think of mining, what do you think? Their first thing was, I always have to work underground. And that was a question for me too. And I said, no, the only underground I go is in the subway. I don't go underground. I work in Toronto. So that, again, that's when you start to realize that there's a whole world out there of young people in the future that, we're sort of ignoring or not sort of tapping into. So I think, looking at the emerging leaders, but there's also that future generation that's coming. We also need to look at that. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
turn to my colleagues here and see what else they have to add to that.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
another point is in terms of a career path, in the whole capital markets area, there's so many opportunities. Uh, there is you could be a banker. You don't have to be a banker, but you can be a investor relations professional. You could be on the finance side of the company, possibly a CFO. Uh, there are a lot of capital markets related. You could be a stockbroker, so to speak, dealing with stocks. So there's a lot of opportunities just in the capital markets area. And as you've mentioned, Annie, there's a lot of other areas within the mining space.
Mhm.
Yeah, for example, if someone who likes modeling, they
Yeah,
could be an analyst. And,
yeah,
for example, I was an analyst for some years, and it
yeah,
was traveling to the mine sites, so getting to see different countries. Um, some of that time was obviously spent at the mine, understanding what
yeah.
was going on there, but you got a feel for the country itself by traveling to the city and then on
Yes.
into the rural areas where many of these mines are and new cultures. It was fantastic experience, So the skills you need are a mix. You need to have good, strong maths. You need to be a good communicator. So don't, ignore some of these things. If you have a chance to learn that now, make full advantage. That's what we tell the students. But for those who are already in the industry, there are, lots of opportunities to it's such a diverse, as Keith said, you could be supporting services for mining, you could be in the mine, you could be outside of the mine, but there's so much need and there's such a wave of retirement coming that there's going to be spots opening up. And currently people are looking. So I think, the opportunities will be there. You have to look around, you have to be proactive. And we often feel victimized, when it comes to racism. And
Mm.
we, sit back and say, well, someone's got to fix this. But to be honest, we can take a leadership role ourselves. I think we have to think of ourselves as maybe CEOs of our own space. Like, what is our
Yeah.
own culture? What's our way of thinking? And what's our strategy? Develop one, have a chat with someone maybe who can help say, well, here are some of the things you could try and do or look out
Yeah.
for, and take some control. And then give, once you start giving the mentoring, the volunteering, you'll find that it's very empowering and it's a very natural way to network with others at your level and higher. And so the exposures become so much greater.
Yeah. And maybe just one more point, Teresa, sorry, to
Yeah.
add on to what Jackie's saying is, again, for those of us who are in those leadership spaces, is actually now looking down and bringing someone up with you. I think
Exactly.
to me that's really key here is, again, being that sponsor, right, for that next generation. So pull someone up with you. Don't just get there and then you stay there and not look back from where you came from, because there's definitely somebody in that pool of young professionals that's ready to come up. So that
And
hyper.
that's the magic, eh? And
Mhm.
I think, Nanny, you're really nailing it. The magic, I think of Keith, I think of what it must have been like 40 years ago. There you are with your wonderfully different but amazing accent, and people just wondering like where to place you, and you not necessarily having the people, the representation to
Yeah.
look up to. And I'm just wondering, as we're talking about this, in your view, now that there is some representation, what is kind of your call to action for, maybe it's similar to what Annie said, but what are you observing in terms of the opportunity for even yourself to give back? Are there enough channels for you to find mechanisms of giving back?
Well, I try to. I informally mentor quite a few young Black professionals. I do that, and not only Black, but young professionals, giving them some tips and making suggestions on what to do and what not to do. Some of the things that if you had to do it over again, one of the things I talk about initiative, but another thing that is very important is networking.
Mm.
I would say if you had to say one single thing one should do uh, uh, for success, I would put networking among that, because if you are out there the opportunities may present itself. Somebody might be looking for a certain kind of job, a certain kind of person, and there you meet that person. I'll give you an example. I worked for three banks. I worked for RBC, Scotiabank, and BMO. But you know how
Mhm.
I got this Scotiabank job? I was at a cocktail reception, and one of the guys I end up chatting with is the vice chairman of the board of Scotiabank. And we were just chatting, and I didn't know he was vice chairman or anything. And I told him I'm a banker, etc., with another bank. And then he keep harassing me. After that, his
Mhm.
HR people keep sending me. And I said, "Lo, I'm happy here where I am. I'm happy at this bank. I was at RBC. I said I'm very happy. I'm not gonna leave." And then they said, "Well, listen, just come over. We just want to chat with you. No obligations. Just have a little chat." And went over there, and they offered me a package that was more than twice what what I had, and a higher position, executive position. So the only way that could have happened is because of networking. I went to this reception and I met the vice chairman, and
You know,
so
that's
you never know how it
you never
happens.
know.
Yeah,
Right. And it's not
And
natural for everyone to network.
yeah,
Some people just don't feel that comfortable, but it is always worth the effort. And you might be surprised at how fun it could be. It certainly can be
yeah,
rewarding, maybe not immediately, but that's just something you build on over time. And it's worth the effort. Absolutely.
yeah,
And you know, just thinking about this whole networking thing, it makes me think of moments where people can think certain people are getting unfair advantages, right? But what I'm hearing you folks say is that it's also about you putting yourself out there and being present in certain environments and circles. And I do think, though, it's important for people to leverage people like yourself, Jackie, Annie, and Keith, to find out where to be. Because I do find sometimes, with the Black communities, people don't even know where to go. Yes, they're going to PDAC, but what should they be doing at PDAC? Like, what are the tips? And yeah, so networking is very important. The other piece I want to touch on is just to circle back. You all talked about the importance of volunteerism, and I was talking to someone the other day that the good thing about volunteering is that it can also give you access to
yes.
opportunities to showcase your leadership and other talents in a more equitable way. Can you comment on that? And what has your experience been with volunteering? Because I truly believe as well that it's a gateway to people gaining important experience.
And you're absolutely right, because I think when I came to Toronto first from Montreal, which is where I'd studied and started working, I needed to get to know who was doing something similar to me in Toronto. And so the CIM was a very natural place to start. And I ended up with the Management and Economic Society as a volunteer. And I joined the education committee. So that was a lot of their activity. And that way you're reaching out, you're meeting students, you're working with others in other professionals. And we were planning conferences, and Keith is involved in a lot of that as well. And so you get to lead things. You start with small projects, you make sure that you can manage them so you're not
Yeah.
stretched, and then you can show that you can deliver. And that's the first step. You just build on that, because it was alluded to before that there's this credibility gap, there's an authority gap, and it applies to, if you're a woman, if you're Black, the minority groups, they have to prove themselves, and that's just the reality of it, sadly, more so than others. So the scrutiny is there, but there are many opportunities to prove yourself. You start small, you build, and you can start new projects that didn't exist. You can go and create something that you see a need for, and people will respect that hugely because they didn't think of it. And now you're leading it, and you're drawing them in, and you're making them look good. So for me, it was about, well, how do I show myself? How can I make a contribution? So it was more about the giving than the getting, but in the giving, you definitely do get a lot. So I would say take that first step if you aren't already doing it, and then enable others, because all of this will count towards how people view you, your effectiveness, and your initiative, and it speaks well to you in a very natural way without you having to try too hard.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
So beautifully
volunteering.
said, Jackie.
Yes, and volunteering is a form of networking too, because
Mhm.
once you are involved, you get to meet the other people on the committee or whatever that you have to work with as a team. It's a way of getting to know more people. And the more people you meet, the more people you deal with, the more doors open. I would say professionally, some of the best deals we've done are deals that came through just meeting someone that wasn't planned. So it does have advantages.
Yeah, no, thank you thank you both for that. And I really hope folks are listening because, I also I encounter a lot of people who, immigrate to Canada as well, even at a later age. And they can't, and just bridging that gap between why am I spending my time on this? It's not making me money now. It's not giving,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I think,
that's you get that all. I used to get that all the time.
but you're a testament of that. I mean,
Yeah.
folks, look at Keith, look at
My
Jackie.
girlfriend at
Jackie.
that time was saying, "Why are you wasting your time on this? Nobody's
Yeah,
paying you for this valuation nonsense." And it's now world recognized. So
Yeah, it's an
amazing,
investment
just
of
amazing.
time and effort.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And Jackie, you really nailed it when you talked about this. Some folks are fortunate enough to come with a certain level of credibility because maybe they look like somebody before who was in that role before or whatnot.
Mhm.
And I think the acknowledgement that, listen, as a talent, a Black talent, you probably need, for some people, need to help them overcome that barrier of your competence by demonstrating and showcasing and getting that record in place.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you know, and I just want to really dive into like specific advice, and maybe I'll start with you, Annie. I know you've done different things to advance your career and whatnot, but let's give people on the call and adults as well, like not just the young people, but I think even career Black professionals that are really looking to be leaders in our mining industry. From what you have seen, because you're around leaders all the time, what are some of those pointers you would like to give?
I was on mute. Um, so I think for me is be unapologetic about your ambitions and know that your background is a strength, not a barrier. Seek mentors who can help you navigate the industry, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes people are afraid to ask questions because they feel that, oh, someone's going to think I'm not ready for something. But I think asking questions actually puts you in a different space. You want to learn. So you're showing that you are, keen to know. And you can't know everything. Like I always say to everyone, I I work in governance and in the legal space, but I also don't know the laws of Wakanda. I can go look, but I can
Yeah.
learn about it. There's, the other thing is networking. We talked about that. Networking is key. Build meaningful connections with people who inspire you. I think that's the most important thing. And you see someone that you want to be them, then you know what? Network with that person. You see them on LinkedIn, connect with them, and then keep that connection going. I want to say that, but sometimes it's hard to do that. But it's an effort. Make an effort. Keep that connection going. If that's who you aspire to be, then connect with that person and learn from them. And lastly, remember that resilience and adaptability are your greatest assets. I think for especially for Black women and for young Black professionals, and I think anyone really in general, that resilience and your adaptability is a great asset for you to have.
Yeah.
I think that those are sort of my few pointers there. I don't know if anybody wants to add on.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Sure. Yeah, so I would reiterate the networking, the volunteering. We've spoken a bit about that. I would say if you think you have something that you want to get better at, go and do, whether it's professional development or going back and doing another degree if that really makes sense. I mean, it's time away from work and family potentially. And so I always told myself in those situations, it's going to get harder before it gets better. And I would dive in, and might maybe take a few years, but it did get better. But I wouldn't say it was easy. It was tough to manage all of the things that one had to do. But that is important. If it's important to you, that's probably worth doing. But definitely don't be limited by someone else's view of you. Know who you are, know what you can bring, know what your potential is. So you don't have to have it all together today, but over time you can prove yourself, find opportunities to do that, and be self-aware. So know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are, and learn to recognize those in other people. Because if they have weaknesses, and some people don't want to acknowledge that, it's a touchy subject. But if you know what they are, you can help them to build themselves, and you can help them to look good, and that will probably pay back in the long term. So there's going to be just that self-awareness, the emotional side of it, or, it could be just that additional amount of self-awareness or awareness of others that others don't have. If you have it, you can use it. And so I'd say all these little things will help you to position yourself as a potential leader, either now or for the future, and specific skills that people will be able to see in you because you demonstrate them through your actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Keith, anything to
On
add
that,
on?
on that, that point, I would say one of the key things is always try and do a bang up job on anything you are asked to do, or anything that you attempt to do, be it in a committee or with volunteering or at your job. If you have an assignment, don't just do an average. Try to be the best. Try to excel, and people remember that. If you excel, if you have and I used to find a lot of times, and we're talking about, uh, there were very few black people on Bay Street in the financial district. You could count them on one hand, if so many. And one of the things, whenever you have, I used to make it an effort. If I had an assignment or a project, and sometimes I get a menial task, I do a bang up job on the menial task. You don't say, well, because I'm black, they gave me this stupid thing, so I'm not going to do it. You do a bang up job even on the menial task, and people start looking at, this person can deliver. I think anything you attempt to do, don't do it as an average. Try to do it as good as you can.
And remember that even the jobs you don't like add to your
Exactly, even the
experience
jobs you
and
don't like.
your
Yeah,
your abilities. Yeah.
I remember once we had a capital markets within um, all these little stories. Uh, a company came in to talk about building a bridge to Prince Edward Island, and all the other bankers, when this company came in, everybody looked at it and kind of laugh and you want to build a bridge to PEI? Yeah. Give it to Spence over there. And everybody kind of laughed. And the company came over, talked to me, and of course it turned out to be the what we now know as the Confederation Bridge. I was the advisor on that bridge, representing Bank of Montreal. At that time,
Wow.
we didn't have something called infrastructure finance. So that was one of the first what they called public-private partnerships, where the federal government had an obligation when Prince Edward Island became a member of a confederation to maintain a link to the island from Canada, and they maintained that link, which was in the constitution, the Canadian Constitution, that specifies that link must be maintained. So they maintained it by having ferries,
Wow.
and the
So a
government
very
would
significant project it turned out to be, right?
exactly, yeah, and the government financed the ferries. But the key point about it is that the money that the government was paying for the ferries, the government says, over time, I'll pay it to any private entity who will help build this bridge. The bottom line is, it was just an idea. I worked with the company through all the bids with the government, etc., go through all the processes until they were the final three, then the final two, and
Wow.
other banks were backing other bidders, and they ultimately won it. They built the bridge, and now if you any investment banker over at BMO and they give you a pitch book, you would see on the top, we were the advisors to the bridge to PEI. And at that time, everybody was laughing because
Yeah.
they think it was, this company from Calgary. And there's a company that built the Saddle Dome,
Yeah.
and they built the
So
bridge
Keith,
out in
what
Vancouver.
I'm really hearing you say is having humility, even when people
Humility,
feel like
and if something is simple,
do it well with excellence.
try to do it. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to just I really want to I want to recognize that, even myself, when I started in the mining industry 21 years ago, I didn't know people like Keith existed, Jacqueline, I hadn't met Annie as well. And I really think that for the people on the call, it's important for us to share these stories because it can be very inspiring to know that, that people who look like you have had a handprint into the very industry that is our livelihood. We do have a question from I'm going to be going back to you at the end so that you can do some wrap up comments, Annie, Jackie, and Keith. But I want to address a question that's in the chat, which is around, we always talk about networking and go network here. Let's be honest. Like for example, PDAC is coming up. There's over 30,000 people. Any tried and true tactics that you can give aspiring people or people in industry?
It's a lot. It can be overwhelming, but I would say when I go down, and I still do this, and I don't think it has changed that much over the years. When I go, I look at what's around, I think about the companies, I do a bit of reading ahead of time, and I say, okay, I'm going to hit these booths. And I walk around. The truth is, I walk right through it, and I will stop anywhere and talk to anybody about their project, about the clothing line they're selling. It could be anything, just to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, tell them a little about myself. We have a chat. It's not, a big formal thing. It's just to get to know you, which is really what networking is about. It's meant to be that easy conversation ultimately. And so in showing interest in them, they show interest in me. That's usually how it works. It's not like I'm here to get a job. What have you got? That doesn't work very well, even when you're looking for a job, let's say. You have to start with, let me learn something about you. And in the process, I'll tell you something about me. And just from how I talk to you, you will learn something anyway. So I do the rounds, I go through, and I might focus on the things I'm most interested in, but everyone there is looking to have a conversation. I won't necessarily hold them up for long. And certainly if they have a crowd around them, I'm going to be sensitive to that. So I'll make it quick. If I have a card, I'll leave it. I'll take some material. And so, it's a give and take, but it's just, for me, fairly informal. If I'm at a reception, I might have a longer conversation with somebody and learn, again, what are they doing? How does it fit into the things? If they ask me where I'm from, and they often do, I say, and where are you from? And if they are from where we are, I will, have you traveled? Is this all you know? So you don't always have to be on the defensive about this, and I'm not saying you put them on the defensive, but don't assume that they've seen the world. So there are lots of things you can talk about is what I'm really saying. And it doesn't have to be about work. It can be about their dogs. It can be whatever they're interested in. And so you just go with the flow.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think it is a big conference, and we know that. So, target who you want to speak to and have your elevator speech ready. Don't ramble. I know sometimes I do that, but I think that elevator speech is important because people are super busy, right? But once they take interest in you, you're ready to go, and you've got that 1 minute line of who you are, what you're looking for, and that also opens up doors. But again, know what you want. It's a big conference. You're not going to be able to talk to everyone, so just target the things that you're looking for.
I agree. I agree. And one of the things that I should mention also is to try to attend some of the sessions, look at the agenda, and use it as a learning opportunity, continuing education, because they are good, really, really good sessions in geology and metallurgy and engineering, in capital markets, in environmental. I sit on that committee, the convention planning committee, and I can tell you the program is quite holistic, and you can learn a lot.
And if you're even just in the coffee area, you can have a chat with whoever's beside you.
Yes.
Exactly. And, so, I want to really, I'm not seeing a question from the audience, but something that I wanted to ask you folks is really, so what does the future look like? When 2025 has started off with a bang. That's how we're going to just we're going to wrap up January and say it started off with a bang. And February, we're still feeling those headwinds. Now, what are your thoughts about how do we move forward? How do we kind of empower the people on the call to say, listen, it's Black History Month. Yes, it's 1 month, but moving forward, how do we take this energy and really excel in the mining industry? So I know it's a loaded question, but maybe I'll start with you, Jackie, just to kind of orientate us, and as you do some parting remarks for this group.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to be resilient to change, and we're seeing these waves of change. We can't anticipate what's going to come. You can anchor yourself as best as possible. First, take care of your health because there's lots to worry about out there. And so, take care of the essentials. That gives you the energy. It will give you sort of a bit more peace of mind, I think, as you go out and try to face all the challenges. There's opportunities. So there's lots of reason to be optimistic. And I think if you're a geologist, you tend to be optimistic by nature. Try to remain confident because again, you're equipped in many ways or you wouldn't be where you are already, right? So it's about drawing on your strengths and building on them. There's a lot of pushback on diversity and equity and the whole bit, inclusiveness. We've seen that. So it's something we do have to be aware of. We're not, operating in a cocoon here. But we press on and we try to be effective at what we can do. So it's about what we're doing for ourselves, but what we're doing for others. And if you bring up others, you show interest in others, others will probably, you can demonstrate that is good, and hopefully others will show interest in you. So don't wait. I would say be proactive, look for what you can do for yourself, look what you can do for others, and prepare yourself for change. And some of that, as I said, for me was, okay, lots of uncertainty when I was coming up in my career. Do I need to touch up my knowledge on this particular aspect? Okay, there's lots of regulatory change. Can I attend some webinars? What do I need to know that would give me an edge, give me the knowledge to do my job better, but also help others do their job, help my organization be prepared? And if I can anticipate that, then you can believe it, they'll be very appreciative. But again, you can't anticipate it all. So just be open. I think we have to be flexible as well and not be not be discouraged when things don't go our way. The business is cyclical. Our own careers can be cyclical. We can go through years where, it's a bit of a downturn, but better's coming. And just, again, if you have good health, at least that's a start, and you just build from there and you see what you can do in the moment and prepare yourself and build yourself back up if that's what has to happen. But yeah, lots of opportunities in mining. It's a great space in general.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then on to you, Keith, before we round out with Annie.
Well, I think get a sense of where the economy is going and whether, in fact, you want to ride a wave within the mining space. I think just to step back, I think gold is off to the races, and if you get involved in the mining space, if you get involved with some gold company, or that will be, I think, one of the strong points in the next coming years. I'm almost confident that gold is going to cross 3,000 in the next few years, or if not this year, and be involved in some of the initiatives with critical minerals. So what I'm saying is, see where your industry, the mining industry, is going, and try to see how you can position yourself with that big wave. And so either gold or critical minerals or uranium. Those are my top three.
Commodity
And
advice, but this is not market guidance. He's not giving you market guidance.
not market guidance, just commodities, not specific stocks. But I'm talking from a career point of view, though. I'm talking about
Yeah.
those areas from a career point of view to ride those waves, which your career. The other key point I'd like to mention is that still focus on whatever you do, try to do it well, and focus on excellence.
Perfect.
And
Okay, Annie, you can
yeah,
round us out here. Thank you.
yeah, thanks. I like that, focusing on excellent, and it is what's the theme for Black History Month? I think it's Black excellence, right? So I think I want to just end with, I am where I am today, but I think there's a few things that I probably would have done differently, and I want to maybe leave everyone with that, in the hope that it might help someone else sort of rethink their strategy. What I think I would have done earlier on in my career, I would have sought mentorship, sponsorship, and I would have been more vocal about my aspirations. And like I said earlier, I think you need to be unapologetic about your ambitions and where you want to be. And I think additionally, leveraging that strategic sponsorship, if you do have it, leverage those strategic sponsorship opportunities and I think those would have accelerated my growth a lot faster. But also building a personal brand and utilizing platforms to share my story would have also helped influence, industry perceptions a lot sooner. And we might be in a different space. We've got a long way to go in mining with respect to representation of, so I think for people and those who are looking who are starting out in their career, just do that earlier on. Grow your brand, look for those sponsors, and I think it will help you exponentially in the lead up to your leadership roles.
So one
Yeah,
thing
thank
I'd
you very
add
much.
there is that networking, which is part of what we're talking about here, it doesn't have to be in person. LinkedIn
Yeah.
is a great way to network and, have your profile say something that people maybe haven't heard before, or give your view on, or maybe talk about your journey. There's all kinds of things you can do on LinkedIn that let
Yeah.
people get to know you. And it's amazing. They may not give you immediate feedback, but a lot of people are looking and learning. So it's a good platform.
Yeah, start a blog, and write about stuff. Don't use Chat GPT. Write about yourself and your experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, so folks, I know we're down to 3 minutes. This was a wonderful lunch and learn for those of us in the Eastern time zone. Thank you so much for putting yourself out there. I hope you sense the importance it is for people like yourself to be visible in our industry, because we don't often see people who look like you. So I just want to just a shout out to Annie for taking time out. And please, people, do follow her on LinkedIn. You'll get a more sense of what she's doing in the governance space. And also with Keith Spence and the work he does with CIM. I know you're not very active on LinkedIn, but through CIM and other
I have
volunteer.
a presence there, though. You can find me, although I'm
Keith, I
not
was looking.
active.
Okay,
Yeah,
full
yeah, yeah,
disclosure, I was looking for him. I didn't find him, so I'm just saying, putting it out
yeah.
there. I gotta gotta dig a little deeper. And then Jackie, I mean, you have such a remarkable resume, and I think you're probably gonna get a lot of DMs because all of you. But thank you for putting yourself out there. And once more, thank you, CIM. We really started this focus on Black History Month a couple years ago, and CIM has been a great platform for taking an active role in seeking to make mining more inclusive and amplifying voices and different faces. And to my colleagues on the call today, it's a pleasure to have you on this journey. And I count on many of you as allies in this conversation and beyond. Have a wonderful February. I hope to see many of you at PDAC. And we shall
Yeah.
be practicing our networking skills.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for coming,
you.
everyone. Okay, catch you later. Bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.